This week, the New York Attorney General announced her involvement in what is now a criminal probe into Trump Org, and we are joined by the former personal attorney to Michael Cohen, who knows his way around that very organization. He is the host of podcast Mea Culpa. He's the author of the book Disloyal. And the news that we've been covering is this intense pressure on the money man, Weisselberg. Insiders have said he knows everything. Michael, I want to be clear. I mentioned this earlier, but now I have the benefit of you as a witness and more. You did call much of this earlier than much of this was confirmed in public investigations. Let's take a look.
In the office with me was Alan Weisselberg, the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization. Mr. Weisselberg, for sure.
The only few people that in the Trump Organization that know anything about the taxes, Alan Weisselberg.
Alan Weisselberg made the decision. Always Alan Weisselberg on the check.
Walk us through what you saw,
I'm not sure
how
I
you
said
knew.
Alan Weisselberg's name enough.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure I said Alan Weisselberg's name enough.
Okay, go ahead. Well, you can say it now. Go ahead.
Alan Weisselberg. Listen, Alan Weisselberg is certainly one of the keys that are being looked at. You know, I said this on Joy Reid's show last night on MSNBC, and I really stand by it. I think the person that's going to end up flipping first is going to be Donald Trump. I truly believe that, like your previous guest that you just had on, Donald Trump never put his name on anything. He had, as you know, no email. He very rarely texted, if ever, unless he was tweeting. And so what he'll do is he's going to turn and say, it wasn't me. It was my CFO. He's the one that did it. He worked with my accountant. It wasn't me. He'll blame everyone. He'll blame Ivanka, Don Jr., Eric, the accountant, Weisselberg, Calamari, me. He'll blame anybody else other than to accept responsibility, because the two things that Donald Trump fears and fears most is, number one, losing his company, losing his money. And the second is losing his freedom. And he will do everything that he can to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I wouldn't be shocked if he would speak to prosecutors before anybody else.
Well, you mentioned that he's going to go and say it wasn't me, classic Shaggy defense. Barbara Rez, who worked at the Trump Org, was with us as well. Take a look at what she says.
I think Weisselberg is very concerned about his kids. I think that what they're doing is the kind of thing they did with Flynn, remember, and his kid, and then he turned or he caved, whatever. I don't think Weisselberg would let his children go to jail.
How does that square with your view that it could be multiple people racing to point at each other?
Well, I had said that prior to Barbara's comments, which is that Alan does not want to spend the golden years of his life incarcerated. On top of that, he has his two sons that he managed to get involved with the Trump Organization. Barry as the operator of Woolman Lasker Rink, as well as the Carousel in Central Park, and Jack on behalf of Ladder Capital. I mean, I've talked about this ad nauseum. And truth be told, he doesn't want to see them in prison either. So the question is going to be whether or not he's going to accept the responsibility himself and spend his golden years, or he's going to provide the testimony that the attorney general and the district attorney wants. It's one of the other. He doesn't get to pick and choose. Now, will Weisselberg at some point try to plead the fifth? That's just not going to work, because the documents that they have will not permit that. He will then place himself and his children in the same jeopardy that we were just talking about.
So you look at the journey here, a lot of times in the investigations and in the public discussion of it, everyone's sort of trying to imagine what these people are up against. You've actually been in the situation, and it's something you've, of course, spoken out on and evolved on. And so I'm curious if you could walk us through, based on your understanding of what we might call the 5 stages of Trump loyalty and how people evolve on it. If you remember for yourself, and I know you've written about it, when you started to change your view and realize that not only was there no protection for you, but there were other things in play, and where do you think Mr. Weisselberg may be on that spectrum?
Again, so it's not just Alan Weisselberg, but we'll use him as the example. What you ultimately find with Donald as this investigation continues is that Allen is going to be thrown under the bus. He's going to be ignored. He's going to be denigrated. They're going to attack his credibility as much as possible when they realize that he is no longer on their side, that he is taking a position to protect himself. And that's when all bets are going to be off. And then Allen is going to have to make the determination, as will Barry and Jack and so many other people, whether or not fealty to Donald Trump means going to prison. And remember something, and you know this very well, Ari, that the district attorney and the attorney general, the Southern District of New York, they all have powers that most people don't understand how the strength of that power. And when they come at you with the full force of government, you really have no choice but to take the plea. Because, one, they could financially destroy you. And Allen, despite his position, is not a wealthy man where he can take on this fight. Certainly neither are his two children. And they will then, of course, the threat of incarceration is enough in order to get people to start to provide answers and cooperate. I probably should have done a 5K one based upon the over 350 hours worth of testimony, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. My goal was just to tell the truth, and that's what I did. And I'm thankful that all of the testimony that I provided, starting with the congressional testimony, the House oversight, as well as to the Attorney General, the District Attorney, and many other agencies, have managed to spawn these 18 investigations that are now showing fruit.
And you mentioned it's not just Weisselberg. We've been looking at him because of the leads on the investigation. But to that point, the management structure of the Trump Organization is fairly small. It's certainly not transparent or anything like a public company. Walk us through how many people would be in the room in addition to, say, Trump and the CFO for the big decisions. I mean, how many people are really at that upper echelon that would be in the know that investigators would want to talk to?
Well, there were about 14 executive vice presidents, and that included the 3 children. So, take the 17 at best. At best, it's 17 plus Donald. And when I say executives, I'm talking about Allen Weisselberg as well, Matthew Calamari, the chief operating officer. You had general counsel, you had co-general counsel. I mean, there were, like I said, approximately 17 of us. Now, it depends upon what the issue was, would make a determination on who would be in the office. For some unknown reason, and being the guy that would usually have to fix Donald's mistakes and problems, I was in the office quite often for many of these conversations. Now, as it relates to his taxes and so on, that was always very private. So that would be legitimately Donald himself, along with Allen Weisselberg and a guy named Donald Bender from Mazars, the accounting company. Now, if it dealt with something that Don Jr. was working on, Ivanka, Eric, then they would be in the office for that specific. But look, nobody saw his tax returns. I would see them laid out each and every year on the massive 40-person table on the 26th floor across from my office, but I never inspected them. I never saw them, never got a copy of them. I would just see it when the door was open, and then they would lock the door so that nobody would have an opportunity to see them either. It was always just Donald, Allen Weisselberg, I say his name again, as well as the accounting firm.
And I'm running over on time. My last question is the shortest. You mentioned your cooperation. You've spoken to the DA investigation many times. Is it your understanding at this point that you don't need to speak to them again?
Oh, no. I will no doubtedly be speaking to them again. There's so much information and there's so much confusion around the operation that, listen, when they need me, they call on me, and I'm there to provide the answers to their questions.
Yep. And if this goes to trial,
it's funny because if
this goes to trial, Michael, if this goes to trial, will you testify against Trump Org executives or the founder?
If they ask me to do so, absolutely. I've already given them my word. What's interesting is in your earlier segment, you made a statement that, obviously Allen has not been charged yet and there's no conviction yet. But you could rest assured that bringing in a guy like Mark Pomerantz in the DA's office, and you know this so well, Ari, as a lawyer yourself, bringing in the DA's office. Now combine that with the Attorney General's office, the chance that there's not going to be indictments coming out and there's not going to be convictions. It's kind of like me waking up tomorrow 7 feet tall and playing power forward for the Knicks, right? It's just not going to happen. It's there, right? It's going to happen.
Right.
So you could rest
completely
assured
understand. We call on you as someone who was in the room and has been through this process. So as a witness, you saying that I think is very interesting. Viewers can hear that. I'm interested to hear you say it. As the journalist, I remind people we aren't there yet, so we don't know, and we always remind people who hasn't been charged for informational purposes. I also get what you're saying. Right. You were there, so it's interesting coming from you, sir. Now I'm way over on time. Michael Cohen, thank you, sir.